Hello tacticians, it's Nox here, and today we're going to be looking at our newest friend, the Neurothrope. And as always, before I get into these, I just want to say a very quick thank you to both Chip and Player4984 for using my friend code. As I've said for everyone else, thank you very much, it is very much appreciated, and anyone who does use my friend code or referral code, depending on what you like to call it, I will give them a shout out. Anyway, on to the Neurothrope. So this is the latest character we can get for the Tyranid faction. Gotta love their little sideline there. Yes! And it comes with the close combat weakness. Now we've only seen this on the Tau before now, and if you want to put your tinfoil hats on, I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be a requirement in a future legendary event, because now we've got the Tau and possibly some of the Tyranids. He also has flying, which we are more than used to. He is also a Psyker, which means he does his psychic attack to his main target and an adjacent target. He has Shadow in the Warp, where enemy Psykers within 2 hexes deal less psychic damage. However, this doesn't affect Tyranid Psykers. We will have a quick look here to see if it affects other enemy Tyranid Psykers. So here we are on a test map with player 1's Neurothrope within range of Orphan. If he was to fire from here, he would do 302 damage. However, if we move up 1 square to be within those 2 hexes of the enemy Neurothrope, you'll see that damage now drops to 227. So yes, it does affect other enemy Tyranids, but not friendly Tyranids. And finally, it is a Synapse creature. Friendly units within 2 hexes of this unit with the instinctive behaviour trait, which I'm going to be guessing is going to be future Tyranid creatures, may behave as normal. They also ignore their battle fatigue if they have it, which is normally when somebody gets destroyed near them. So at level 26, which is our first port of call when we look at a new character because of TA, what does this guy actually do? Well, his Spirit Leech is actually interesting option to use, because not only does it do a certain amount of psychic damage to an enemy within 3 hexes, if that target is suppressed, which you can do with Thaddeus and a number of other characters, then you deal additional damage. Now, on average, we're looking at maybe 600 damage, which isn't actually going to kill anyone in one go, but being psychic damage, it will certainly take a massive chunk out of their health bar. Also, the Neurothrope and friendly Tyranids adjacent to it will heal equal to 55% of the total damage dealt with this ability. So obviously, depending what the other Tyranids are like, you'll want to surround this guy, use the Spirit Leech, heal everyone up, move on. So is this a good ability to use in TA? Well, yes, I guess. It is a big amount of damage which can't be blocked because of the fact it is psychic damage. It does a 100% pierce ratio, which is great. But as I said, it's not going to kill anyone on its own, like certain other characters who I won't mention, and it either suppresses or benefits by another character being suppressed. So obviously we're looking at other Tyranids in the future will be able to do this suppression. For its passive ability, the Neuroparasite, each enemy that is dealt psychic damage by the Neurothrope is infected with a Neuroparasite until either the unit is healed or the Neurothrope is defeated. When a unit infected with a Neuroparasite takes psychic damage or becomes affected by an attack or ability that would suppress it, the Neuroparasite increases its level by 1 up to a maximum of 10. Purely because of the fact that this scales means this isn't a TA or arena character. This is someone we're going to be looking at to be using in the guild raid bosses. And even at this low level, being silver and level 26, you're looking, if you get to level 10, an additional 4,500 damage just when it attacks. Now, this actually does scale even further when you look at level 50, and we'll look at that in a minute. So this guy has a movement of 2, and unfortunately for TA and PvP, this does start to ring some alarm bells. However, he is the first psychic character to have a range of 3, and that may be enough to let you, if you're a massive fan of Tyranids, to put him in your TA or PvP team. However, with his close combat weakness and 1 physical attack in close combat, you can tell that really isn't the place where he wants to be. The last thing which makes me think that these Tyranid characters are not wanted for the TA or PvP is this new piece of equipment, the Bone Sword. It has a crit chance of only 25%. When you compare this to other characters who have got access to a 35% crit chance, when it comes to the TA PvP, you really want that additional chance to crit. However, there is one thing I will say, is if the damage of these creatures are on average higher, then that crit chance being lower will of course be mitigated because you're looking at using their natural damage rather than relying on the crit. Unfortunately, that isn't the case for the Neurothrope. If you compare the Neurothrope's damage to other Psychers, you'll actually see he's on the lower end of the damage scale. You have people like Eldrian, stick with me here, who, although his initial damage is fairly low, he gets 2 attacks off it, so that puts it above the Neurothrope's damage. Sybil, a very common character, does more damage at the same level than the Neurothrope and has a massive hitting special. So as such, I think this rules the Neurothrope completely out of TA and PvP. So let's have a look at what happens if you just gear this guy up a little bit more to be used in guild raids. So now we have him at a fairly achievable epic and level 35 skills. Now, you really don't need to have the Spirit Leech at level 35 unless the whole Tyranid team do become a complete guild raid killer. The passive Neuroparasite, however, at this point now does an additional 941 damage for each level. So you're looking at nearly 9,500 damage for every attack that the Neurothrope does. And that is by far exceeding what Eldrian can give to one character. And if you're persistent enough to get him all the way up to level 50, then that Neuroparasite is doing 3,290 damage for each extra level. That's 32,000 damage for every single attack that the Neurothrope actually does. Pretty incredible, and a certain guild raid boss killer. So here we are against Ghazghkull. And I've placed in a few troops to test out a few things, and although the Neurothrope only has a move of 2, he can still get in range in the first turn to put that very important Neuroparasite on Ghazghkull. So the next time he attacks, he'll do even more damage. Abraxas can also follow up, but he can't quite reach, so we're going to have to wait for the next turn. Now, Ghazghkull's moved in a great position for me, but this is purely to test out a few things. First, we'll move Eldrian within range. His Doom only says 304 damage, so we're not expecting any additional parasites to be added from his ability, but why not do extra damage if you can? And of course, since we're in range, we'll launch an attack, and the Neuroparasites go up to 2. And we've now seen the damage dealt to Ghazghkull is now 2,800 instead of 667. Now, both Thaddeus and Volk will deal suppression damage. And by shooting with Volk, you will see that this has now gone up to 4 from the previous 2. And the reason for this is Abraxas's passive ability, which lets Volk do an additional psychic damage attack with his normal ranged attack. Now, if we move Abraxas and actually use his active to summon in the Pink Horrors and the Screamers, we should be able to get this number up to 10 fairly quickly. However, of course, I will add another suppression with Thaddeus, and as you can see, we're up to 5. Before we use Abraxas's ability, we'll just have a look. This damage is now going up to 5,676. When we use Abraxas's active ability to summon in the troops, this Neuroparasite counter keeps on getting higher and higher. And right now, it's at level 8, which means when the Neurothrope does its damage, it's already looking at 8,500 damage for one attack in turn 2. Now, this is taking into account Eldrian's buff, but as you can see, the Neurothrope doesn't rely on Eldrian to be able to dish out the damage. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting you use the active summons here, because obviously when Ghazghkull summons in his troops, he'll be summoning in a lot more, and so it's probably not the best idea unless you think that you can get away with those additional summons purely to get the damage on Ghazghkull himself. The benefit, of course, of doing this is that, well, turn 3 and he now has the maximum of 10 Neuroparasites, and even with his slow movement of 2, the Neurothrope is still able to get within reach and do 10,000 damage with his next attack. This is certainly a character for those who really want to do well in the guild raids. Bear in mind, of course, as he is a Tyranid, he won't be able to be used in the Tyranid guild raids. So, as a roundup, this guy, in my opinion, will not make any waves at all in the TA or PvP arenas. He will, however, be a fantastic asset in the guild raids. Now, what about the legendary events? Now, he will have a role to play, but I would say you'd only be using him if you can't use anyone else and you want to round out your roster. Finally, if any of you out there are looking for a new guild, or your guild is looking for a new home, please feel free to reach out to us. We are always welcoming new players and new guilds into our midst. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you on the battlefield.